that out to everybody. So, Cody, whenever you get a chance, if you can email that out to everybody, that would be great. I do appreciate that very much. And if you are interested, if you're a real estate agent, you are interested in getting continuing ed credit, but you hadn't registered yet, you can still do that even after the program. Just email Cody and let him know, and he'll email over the registration link. So with that, I guess, Cody, we'll go on and we'll get busy. Let me share my screen. All right, let me share my screen here and get this presentation going. We're going to be talking about the Texas Ag Exemption here, and this is one that's, you know, every single person that I run across up here in Northeast Texas, since I've been in office since 1999, this is always a huge and hot topic, and everybody's wanting to know about this one. So I've done a lot of work with individual producers, as well as talking to the central appraisal districts in a lot of different counties. And I've gleaned a lot of information. I mean, there's a lot of head knowledge that's just packed up in here and waiting to get out. So let's go on and let's get started with what this is all about. The ag exemption, it's kind of a common term. It's a slang term that's used to explain the value that's given by the central appraisal district to land. Now, usually people start thinking about the ag exemption after they've already bought the land. That's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. We need to think about it and come up with a plan before we purchase the land. And then we're just finding that land that meets those purposes, and we're just implementing that plan. Now, I do have to give homage to Seinfeld here. If you'll remember Seinfeld, there was a soup Nazi there, and he used to say, you know, if you said something that he didn't like, he used to say, "No soup for you, come back 1 year." Well, it's not an exemption. Agricultural landowners still pay property taxes, and they still pay them at the same rate that everybody else does. So their school tax rate, if you happen to pay school tax, or your county tax rate, all of those are still set at the same rate. The difference is it's the value of that land. It's not at market value whenever you have ag land. It's actually at the productivity value of that land, which is a lot lower. It can result in a lot lower property taxes if you have this ag use value. And whenever we're talking about the ag use value, the formal definition is the 1D1 open space. Now, open space does not mean that you don't have to do any ag production. You can just leave it open. No, that's just the term that they use. And you're going to see, we're going to walk through what is sent down by the state that the central appraisal districts have to look for whenever they're trying to value either land at ag or not. Now, I give you an example here. This is property that's right on the border between Plano and Frisco. Frisco is north of this highway. That's the Sam Rayburn Tollway that runs through right in between Plano and Frisco. Stonebriar Mall is just north of that tollway in Frisco. And just south of that is about 30 acres that was in wheat. And that purple shaded area actually has the ag use value. And the reason that I'm giving you this particular example, I know that y'all are in Fannin County. This example is in Collin County, but look at the difference. It's 30.84 acres. At market, the total value of that land was about $26.8 million. The property tax liability was $612,000 a year if it was valued at market. But it's valued at ag because that property it was planted in wheat. That 30.84 acres, the market value is just under $5,000 total. That not the market value, the ag value is just under $5,000. So in actuality, all the property owner had to pay in property taxes was $109.94 per year for that property. This shows you the vast difference between market value property taxes and ag value property taxes. Now, this is an extreme example. I realize that, but this just shows to some how important this ag value really is. Now, there's one disclaimer that I want to say, or one qualifier that I want to put out. There's a lot in the industry that say, if you want your ag exemption, which it's not an exemption, it's a value. If you want your ag value, just put a couple of cows out on the property and you'll be okay. I've even had real estate lawyers say that exact same quote to me, and that's false. That's false, and we're going to walk through why this is false. But that's a common misconception about ag use, is just put a couple of cows out there and you'll be okay. Now, when the Central Appraisal District, or the CAD, as you're going to see it referred to in this presentation a lot, whenever the Central Appraisal District is looking at land and trying to determine, does it qualify for ag use or does it not? They've got 6 criteria, and only 6 criteria to go by, that's sent down by the state. Now, how they interpret that criteria can be a little bit different, but there are 6 basic criteria that they have to follow. The first one is that the ag appraisal applies only to the land itself. Now, that does include the roads, the ponds, the fences that are used for ag production, but it's only for the land. So we've got 2 pictures here, and the one on the left is a wood shop. Now, it's my dream shop. I'd love to have that wood shop, but there's nothing going on in there that has to do with agricultural use. So the land underneath that wood shop would not be considered ag use. The picture on the right, that's a farmer putting up hay underneath a barn. Now, that hay may be used either for selling later on, or it may be for use to feed cows later on. The land underneath that barn on the right would be ag use. Now, the barn itself would be valued at market. It doesn't get any type of lower value because it's sitting on ag property. That barn is an improvement. Think of it like your own house. You have a value for the land and you have a value for the improvements that the Central Appraisal District applies. Same way here. The land underneath that barn on the right would be ag use. So it would be valued lower than market value. The barn itself is actually an improvement to that, and it's valued at market. So there's been questions that I've received before and that Central Appraisal Districts have received before that have been in regards to, well, the barn on that property should be discounted as well because it's sitting on ag property. No, that's not the case. It's an improvement to the land. The next thing the Central Appraisal District's looking for is active agriculture taking place. You can see over here on the left-hand side, there's a picture that has a fence that's kind of broken down. If you have any cows out there, they're over in the next county. Who knows where they're at by now? There's no crops growing out there. So that land, no active agriculture is taking place. That would be a red flag for them to possibly be able to kick it out from ag use. The picture on the right, it's got a brand new fence. It's got cows behind that fence. So active agriculture is going on the property on the right. It's probably not going on for the picture on the left. That's the second thing that the Central Appraisal District's looking for. The third thing for qualifying for ag use is the principal use of the land has to be agriculture. Now, if this entire spread was owned by underneath the same property number for the Central Appraisal District, this all the way up to the trees, this big tree line in the back, if all of the property that you see up to that big tree line was all one property, then probably active agriculture is going on and the primary use is agriculture. You may be baling hay out there between those fences in the back. You may be raising horses, breeding horses and raising them for sale. Active agriculture is going on. And the principal use is agriculture. However, if our property was defined only by this small row of trees that's right behind this small little shack, this one right up front with the cement pond, as the Clampetts used to call it, if the property was only defined by the borders of the small row of trees right behind the house, and you had a small garden out to the side, well, the primary use is going to be your homestead. It's not going to be agriculture. So that will not qualify. Again, this is the third thing that the Central Appraisal District's looking for, is the primary use is agriculture. This next one, degree of intensity. This is where that comment, just put a couple of cows out there and you'll be okay. This is where that falls apart. If the Central Appraisal District is doing a site evaluation, and trust me, they do site evaluations and sometimes more than one a year. If they're doing a site evaluation and they see the picture on the left, just a couple of cows out there, but they were looking for numbers similar to what we see on the picture on the right, then you've got a problem. The Central Appraisal District is looking for a degree of intensity that's generally accepted in the county. And this is where the Central Appraisal District will oftentimes rely heavily on Cody or some other county extension agent to say, what should we be expecting? Because as we know, this degree of intensity, it changes depending on drought or a lot of rain. This degree of intensity can change. And so the Central Appraisal District may call Cody up, and I'm sure that they probably have, and have said, hey, Cody, what do we do? 3 years ago we had a drought. What about intensity? How's that going to change this year? And so Cody can give them some general guidelines as to what we're looking for out there on property. Now it's up to them to apply it. But again, this is where the connection between Extension, Cody, and the Central Appraisal District can overlap, or they can at least call and ask for some guidance. The last two are pretty simple. Land has to be devoted to a qualifying ag use for at least 5 out of the last 7 years. If it's inside the city limits, though, it has to be 5 out of the last 5 years to qualify. And the last one is you have to file on time and you have to file a valid application with the Central Appraisal District. That goes without saying. If you don't file on time and you don't file a valid application, you're not going to get the ag use. Now, these are the 6 criteria that every single Central Appraisal District across the state has to determine whether land qualifies for ag use or not. Now, I would like to focus on this 5 out of the last 7 years for just a little bit on this next slide. Let's say that you're trying to buy some property and it's a toss-up between 2 properties that you want to buy. Neither one of them have their ag use, but one of the properties, the current landowner has been working on trying to get the ag use for the last 3 years. Now, they're not there yet because they still have to prove up 5 years worth of work. They can actually fill out an affidavit and state in that affidavit that they've been producing a qualified ag product for the last 3 years. You can file that affidavit with the Central Appraisal District and you can get credit for their work. So this is one where the one property, they've been working for 3 years. The other one's just been sitting idle. Neither one of them have their ag use. That affidavit may be the turning point or the selling point to say, well, I've only got to work 2 more years before I get my property taxes lowered on this property versus I have to work 5 years on the next one. So something like this can really help. And I've seen a lot of central appraisal districts accept these affidavits with no question. In other words, we're just going to take the person at their word. If they're willing to sign this in front of a notary, we're going to accept it. A little bit more about degree of intensity. This is determined by the individual central appraisal district of the county. It's not determined at the state level. Some CADs, they require minimum acreage. Some only look at the degree of intensity and ignore acreage altogether. This is where it can get a little bit tricky and a little, don't start looking at one county and think that it's that way across the state, because it's not. I'm going to give you an example here. Here's 5 counties, and trust me, I'm going to get to Fannin in just a second, but here's 5 counties: Tarrant County, Denton County, Collin County, Grayson County, and Cook. Very close together. This is 5 out of the 22 counties that I cover in Northeast Texas. So just focusing on these 5 counties, and the reason that I did was because they did have information on their central appraisal district websites that specifically addressed intensity levels. Just looking at these 5 counties and looking at their requirements for cattle, for livestock alone. None of the other requirements. I just want to compare their requirements for a livestock. As you can see, Collin County says they have a minimum of 2 animal units run on pasture land for the majority of the year. Now, we're going to get into what an animal unit is in just a little bit. But this indirectly says something about acreage, but they don't specifically say it. Cook County says a minimum of 10 animal units or 30 acres, period. They don't have any leeway there. So Cook County, with it being 30 acres minimum for livestock, that's telling me that they really don't want to see the land fragmentation. They don't want to see extremely small farms up there yet. Now, it is coming. We know that. But right now, they're kind of fighting it with the Central Appraisal District, putting a 30-acre minimum on it. Denton County, standard practices: fertilize annually, weed and brush control, fences maintained, stock water, systematic marketing of animals, and property management for land for long-run forage. There's no mention in here at all of anything about acreage. Denton County does not have a minimum in terms of acreage for livestock. The other 2, Cook County does, Collin County does indirectly. Denton County just says, basically, we want you to be managing the property for long-run forage and producing livestock while you're producing livestock. Grayson County, native pasture, which we'll get to the differences between native and improved pasture in a minute. Native pasture, 1 animal unit for every 7 to 10 acres. If you have a cow-calf operation, they want at least 5 cows. Improved pasture, 1 animal unit for every 3 acres. Again, at least 5 cows if you're a cow-calf operator. So they have something very specific in terms of acreage there. Tarrant County says native pasture, 10 acres minimum, improved pastures, 8 acres minimum, period. Now, anybody that's on this Zoom meeting, Cody, you included, do you have any idea why Tarrant County says 8 acres minimum on improved pasture or 10 acres for native?
I'm wondering if it's because you can stock the improved pastures a little heavier than the native pastures.
Well, that's exactly right. But any idea why 8 acres is the magic number there and 10 acres is the magic number for native pasture?
I don't have a clue.
Because it takes 8 acres on improved pasture in Tarrant County to run 1 horse. And it takes 10 acres minimum of native pasture to run 1 horse in Tarrant County. No matter how progressive, no matter how much expansion Tarrant County's seeing, they're still basing all their decisions on a horse. So I thought that was kind of interesting that I had a county agent a long time ago from Tarrant County point that out to me, that they base everything on a horse still. Now, some central appraisal districts down around Houston, they've actually gotten to the point where they will terminate your ag valuation if you put too many animals out there, because you're looking more like a feed yard if you do. So I have not seen that up here in Northeast Texas yet, but it's an interesting trend down around Houston that could catch on. Now, looking at Fannin County specifically, this information comes directly from the Central Appraisal District's website in Fannin County. And this is what they have as of yesterday. So it's as up to date as we're going to get. And if there's anything that's wrong in here, I do have the disclaimer that I copied and pasted it directly from their website. So don't hold me accountable for that if there's any misspellings even. But for irrigated and dryland crops, they're looking for 10 acres in Fannin County. And that's consisting of wheat, corn, soybean, sorghum, or other standing grains. Improved pasture, 10 acres minimum. Hay, 10 acres minimum. Requires a minimum of 2,000 pounds of hay production per year, per acre, for native grasses, and 4,000 pounds per year for improved. Irrigated, non-irrigated orchards, 3 acres minimum. 14 native, non-orchard setting, or 70 improved in a traditional orchard setting, productive fruit-bearing trees with a 25-foot spacing or 27-foot for improved traditional orchard, productive fruit-bearing trees with a 40-foot spacing that's equal to 1 acre of orchard. They're very specific whenever it comes to an orchard, what they're going to qualify.
So Blake,
what I could find.
Blake, that's 70 improved trees per acre if you're in an improved setting.
Yes.
All right.
Animal units, what they have talks about acreage and basically how many you can put out there. Native pasture with sand is your base is 12 acres per animal unit. Native pasture blackland is 10 acres per animal unit. Improved pasture sand is 10 acres per animal unit, and improved pasture blackland is 8 acres per animal unit. They talk about how many we can put out there, but they don't really give us a minimum that we have to have. But it's pretty easy to say, if I have 48 acres of native pasture that's sand base, I have to have at least 4 animal units. And again, we're going to get into what animal units are here in just a minute. But look at the differences between the last slide and here. These counties are very, very close to each other, and every single one of them has differences in their interpretation. And that goes right down to what Cody faces, being the county extension agent. There's vast differences between Fannin County and, say, Delta County. or even Fannin County and Lamar County, Fannin County and Grayson County. There's vast differences in rainfall patterns, in soil types. And so the state gives these central appraisal districts the leeway to come in here and have some interpretation themselves as far as what they're going to require. It's really an eye test whenever it comes about degree of intensity. It has to look like you're trying to produce a commodity generally for sale. And that's why it's so important, because the differences in the interpretation and the eye test. That's why it's important to consult the local central appraisal district for specific requirements that they're going to have, because not all central appraisal districts interpret the law the same, or it applies differently in different areas. Here's some examples of eye tests, whether or not it's good. Up here on top, we've got a lavender field. Now, I don't know anything about producing lavender. I know it grows in the ground. I know what the plant looks like, but I don't know anything about farming it. I don't even know what the cost of production is. I could find it out, but I don't know that. But what I do know is, number one, I'll bet that there's at least someone in here that has something in their house that's lavender. Number two, the picture on the left looks like there's a lot of work to be done out there. It looks like intensity-wise, this looks good to me. Picture on the right, the lavender farm at the top, there's about 5-6 plants out there. I think you better do a little bit more, because you're not really trying. This intensity, the eye test, the one on the left probably would pass, the one on the right, probably not. Look at the middle two pictures, the hay production. Hay on the left, it's just been rolled up. It's fresh, it's new. You can tell that they're actively engaged in hay production. Hay production on the right, those bales of hay have been out there quite a while, a couple of years maybe, 3, 4, 5 years. You're not actively producing hay out there. The one on the right probably would not pass the eye test. Looking at the pictures of the cattle on the bottom, cattle on the left, looks like there's a good number out there. They're actively grazing. I mean, it looks like you're doing what you should be doing. There's calves on the ground. Picture on the right, if you're claiming that you have cows out there, you need to go find them, because you probably haven't seen them in 2 or 3 years. So again, it's an eye test. Most central appraisal district appraisers for agriculture, they either grew up in agriculture or they're actively engaged in agriculture themselves. They know what they're doing. They've seen the tricks. They've seen the scams. Yes, I've had the example of a central appraisal district telling me that one landowner went out one night, bought hay, round bales of hay, had them delivered at night, rolled them out around the field, and then claimed, hey, look what I produced. You didn't produce that. We know that you bought it. They've seen the tricks. Always shoot straight with them, because they are there to help you, believe it or not. Now, I get several questions from landowners whenever they purchase land or before they purchase land of, I'm going to be calling the central appraisal district. What do I need to ask them? And there's 4 questions that I want them to ask, and I need answers to. And after we get the answers to those questions, then we can start getting on the road to providing some guidance. The first question is for crops. What are the typical yields? What are the typical yields for the county for the crop that I'm going to be growing? What are you looking for? Second, is there a minimum acreage that's needed? Are there any minimum acreages for this crop? Next one sometimes applies. Does the central appraisal district require a production plan? Now, most of the time they don't. They don't require a written production plan. Instances where they might, Could be with vineyards with grape production, or with container trees. They may require a production plan there, but that one's usually not found much. As far as livestock, I just want to know on the land that I have, how many animal units are you going to require? That's it. Tell me that, and that's what I need to know. If I can get those 4 questions answered, then we can really start rolling towards finding what crop, what livestock do you want to produce, and how are you going to produce it on the land that you've got. Now, we've covered quite a bit in terms of degree of intensity, and I want to give you some ideas of what we expect or what we generally see up here in Northeast Texas. The first one, in terms of hay production, typical yields that we can expect are 2 to 3 cuttings per year, producing 2 to 3 bales per acre, with each one of them weighing about 1,000 pounds each. That's usually what we see in Northeast Texas in terms of hay. Now, yes, native pasture, improved pasture, that's going to change some of the information, but that's on average what we see. Looking at viticulture, these are wine grapes, typical yields, 2 to 6 tons per acre after the 4th year of establishment. Wine grapes, I've done quite a bit of work on the economic side of it, and they can create a very, very high gross revenue, but it does take you 4 years of establishing that plant to get it going. And you've got there's a lot of risks associated with it, diseases that grapevines can contract, and it can actually kill your whole vineyard. So yes, there is a potential here if anybody's interested in wine grapes. I've done a lot of work, and Cody can, we can look at it if you'd like, but 2 to 6 tons per acre up here in Northeast Texas, depending on variety. Now, beekeeping is a new one, and it's one that's set in stone, no questions asked. Here's the way it is. This is sent down from the state. This is the only one that talks about intensity from the state that is set in stone, sort of. You got to have a minimum of 5 acres for beekeeping. You have to have 6 hives for the first 5 acres, 1 additional hive for every 2.5 acres over that. And there's a 20-acre maximum. So if you have 100 acres and you put beehives out on 20, you're not going to get to ag use on the whole 100 acres. And if it's all underneath one tax ID number with the Central Appraisal District, that 100 acres is under one tax ID number, you will not get it for the entire 100 acres. You can only get it for 20 acres. And you cannot split it up by putting 6 hives on this 20 acres, 6 hives on this 20, 6 hives on this 20 across one property that has one tax ID number. Again, it's 20 acres maximum. Now, the reason that I said it's set in stone, sort of, Cody, besides the 6th beehive here, can you spot what might be missing in this picture? Any? Cody?
I'm looking.
Oh, someone else chimed in.
Is it the supers?
Yeah, is it? I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
I can't get back there. Shoot. I lost it.
I know what it is.
It's the super.
What's that?
There's no bees.
There's no bees. That's exactly right. The law states that you have to have 6 hives per acre, or for the first 5 acres. It doesn't say anything about putting bees out there, does it? So, there's a loophole in this law. Now, yes, if you put beehives out there, chances are bees are going to move in. Absolutely. But it doesn't say anything in the law that bees have to be out there. And trust me, if I'm a central appraisal district and I'm doing spot evaluations, site evaluations, I'm not going to walk out there and open up that top and look and see if there's any bees in the hives. I'm not going to do that. And I do know that some central appraisal districts actually use aerial photography from airplanes as well to do site evaluations. You're not going to spot the bees whenever you're doing an aerial photography. I don't care how good the resolution is. Now, some central appraisal districts across Texas have seen this loophole and they're closing it up by saying that you have to also show that you've bought bees or that you're producing honey. So this is one, again, it's catching on in popularity, bees are, across the entire state. And I think it's because of the minimum acreage. That minimum acreage of 5 acres is really attractive. And we'll talk about here in just a little bit some of the issues that I've seen and some of the solutions that I've found with bees from some of the clientele that I've worked with in particular. Now, wildlife. If you currently are in agriculture, if your land's designated as ag value or ag use by the Central Appraisal District, you can actually apply and switch it over to wildlife. But again, you have to already have qualified for ag use. And if you're going to qualify for wildlife, you have to meet 3 criteria of the ones that are listed on the right-hand side. They're looking for habitat control, predator control, providing supplemental water and some supplemental food, providing shelters, or making census counts. You can pick 3 and write up the plan of how you're going to do it, and you can actually apply for the wildlife use for agricultural use. Now, once you're in wildlife, you can switch back to agricultural use and switch back to wildlife. You can go in and out of wildlife back and forth. So that's something that I don't know why you would, but it is possible. Now, Texas Parks and Wildlife, they actually offer a lot of information, and they're the ones that actually the central appraisal districts across the state of Texas turn to whenever it comes to the wildlife use for agricultural use. Here's an example. Here's their website, copy of their website. There's a few PDF and links here that I've highlighted. Again, these will be shown, and this website will be shown in the links or in the handouts that you get from Cody whenever he mails those or emails those out. But the first link or PDF that I've got are the guidelines for qualifying for ag land in wildlife management use. That's what they're looking for. The next one, standards for qualification. That's going to be exactly what the Central Appraisal District is going to look at. A little bit further down on the page, underneath the forms tab is Wildlife Management Plan for Agricultural Tax Valuation. This is the plan that a landowner would download and complete and submit to the Central Appraisal District. Now, this plan, this PDF, it is fairly long, but there's a lot of fill in the blank and drop down menus for question answers on this plan. It's not real in depth. So if you have land, you're looking at switching over to wildlife, it's a good idea to take a look at this website and to download that form, because that's what the Central Appraisal District is going to be looking to get. Also, it wouldn't hurt to talk to the Central Appraisal District ahead of time. I know that some Central Appraisal Districts, they may not have anything in terms of acreage requirements for anything else, but they may for wildlife. For instance, Collin County, it's specific. It's 8 acres and above. You cannot be under 8 acres. Even if you're already qualifying on 5 acres for bees, you cannot qualify for wildlife use unless you have 8 acres or more. Horses. Horses are one of those that may or may not qualify. It usually depends on whether or not you are producing offspring or your horses are producing foals. Foals can be sold or can be kept. And this is where a minimum acreage is probably going to be required. And if it's not, it should be, because as Cody can attest, if you put a horse out on property and you don't have enough acres for it, that horse is it's gonna remove every bit of the grass that's out there. There'll be more grass in your living room than there will be out on the property if that horse doesn't have enough acreage. And that goes to the anatomy of how the horse eats. The horse eats with the front of its teeth. And it eats the grass, so it can go right down to the ground. A cow, on the other hand, it wraps its tongue around grass, pulls it into its mouth, and then bites. So that the cow can only get down so far, whereas the horse can go right down to the ground. Now, I'll also say that some central appraisal districts, whenever it comes to horses, some even qualify pleasure horses. And Dallas County at one time was one of those counties. And it wasn't because they were qualifying the land for horses, it was you managing the grass underneath. Because they were looking at, are you producing small? I'm sorry? Was there a question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, not a problem. The reason that they were qualifying pleasure horses was because they were qualifying whether or not you were managing the grass that the horses were eating. The law states that you're producing a qualified ag product for human or animal consumption, and their interpretation was, well, you're managing the grass, and if you're doing that, the horses are eating that grass, so that's going to qualify. That's again one of those where vast differences in the interpretation of how the law reads. Now, livestock. This is all livestock.
Hey, Blake.
Yes.
Before you go to livestock, in Fannin County, horses aren't even on the list. So that anybody in Fannin County or any real estate agents for Fannin County specifically, horses are a no-go.
There you go. And that's why it's so important to talk to the local central appraisal district. I mean, it's so very important. You know, in particular, if you own land that crosses over a county, then you probably need to talk to both. That's going to be important to do. Livestock, this is all livestock, whether it's cows, whether it's sheep, whether it's goats, you name it. They must be raised for sale or for herd building. Central Appraisal District's going to look at your fences, your water facilities, and make sure you're maintaining the grass. And the numbers, again, have to be similar to what we see in the area. Now, before we get into those numbers, I've got some did you knows. Did you know that Texas leads the nation? 12.3 million cattle in the state of Texas. That's 13% of all the cattle in the United States. Generally, whenever we think of Texas, we think of huge herds, vast amounts of land. That's not the case. The average size cattle herd in Texas is only 32 head of cattle. That's one that I know that some of y'all may have already heard this presentation, so yes, you're going to hear the same joke. But we actually refer to the smaller cattle numbers as washing machine cattle. Mama needs a new washing machine, so we need to go sell a calf. Texas has enough cattle to put 45 head on every single square mile in the state of Texas. There's just little over 100 people per square mile in the state of Texas. There's 45 head of cattle per square mile here. That's a lot of cattle whenever you start thinking about it. Now, we've talked about animal units. I've mentioned the term stocking rates. These are all terms that are used whenever we start looking at numbers, livestock numbers. How many should be out there? The first term, stocking rate, that's the total number of animals on a given amount of land over a certain period of time. Think of it like the grocery store. How many boxes of cereal are on a shelf over time? That's the stocking rate of cereal. Well, how many animals are out there on land? That's the stocking rate of those animals for that land. The carrying capacity is the stocking rate that can be sustained over time. Think again about the shelf on a grocery store. It's only so big. It can only hold so many boxes of cereal. The carrying capacity there is extremely small. So once you go over that carrying capacity, you can't go any higher. Same way with land. The carrying capacity there is how many animals can be put out there and sustained over time. So you can't put too many. The carrying capacity can't be too high because it cannot be sustained over time. And it can't be too low because that's what they're looking for. Now, whenever it comes to animal units, all animals are not created equal. An animal unit is defined as a 1,000-pound animal consuming 26 pounds of grass per day. One cow weighing 1,000 pounds is one animal unit. A goat is a lot smaller than a cow. It doesn't weigh as much. It doesn't eat as much. So it's a fraction of an animal unit. In fact, one goat is 0.19 animal units. Here we have a breakdown of all the different types of animals. Horses, 1.1 animal units. A beef cow, 1,000 pounds is 1. Sheep weighing 90 pounds is 0.16 animal units. And a goat is 0.19. So if you see that 10 acres is required for one animal unit, you could put one cow out there. That's one animal unit. Or you could put 5.26 goats. I don't know what 0.26 of a goat is, so let's just call it 6. You could put 6 goats out there, and they're both equal to one animal unit. That's why it's such a moving target in terms of how many should I have out there? Well, what type of animal are you talking about? Looking at the Central Appraisal District, here's where we get into native pasture and improved pasture because there are differences. Native pasture is what would be in the area if we didn't try and manage it at all. If you stop mowing your grass and you stop fertilizing it, stop putting out weed and feed, and just let it go, let it do whatever it wanted, the native grasses that were traditionally here would come back, reseed themselves, and that's what your yard would be, is all the native plants. Well, these native plants, they don't have as much nutrition as the improved varieties that we plant. So you need more acres of native pasture, of native grasses, in order to sustain animal units. For instance, typically up here in Northeast Texas, you need 4 to 6 acres of native grass to sustain one animal unit. If that was a prescription, and if you own 20 acres, you'd need 3 to 5 animal units on that land. So that's 3 to 5 cows, or 19 to 31 sheep, or 16 to 26 goats. Now, improved grasses such as coastal Bermuda grass, common Bermuda grass, it's got more nutrition in it. So you don't need as many acres to sustain those animal units. In fact, up here in Northeast Texas, generally you need 3 to 5 acres of improved grasses to sustain one animal unit. That means on 20 acres, you need 4 to 6 cows, or 25 to 38 sheep, or 21 to 32 goats. So now we've covered all of the requirements as well as what all these animal units are and the stocking rate. This all goes into what the Central Appraisal District's looking for whenever it's trying to determine whether or not you qualify for ag use. The next topic that we're going to get into is the rollback tax. Now, Cody, before we get into that, do you want to take maybe a 5-minute break to allow everybody to get up, use the restroom, or get another drink of coffee or whatever they need?
That'd be
Stretch
fine.
their legs.
We can come back right at 11 o'clock.
All right, sounds good. Why don't we do that? We'll just take a short break, and then we'll come back right at 11 o'clock, and I'll actually stick around online. If anybody has any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer some. We'll also have those ability to answer questions at the end as well.
I do have a question for you.
Yes.
There was a picture slide back to the requirements on trees, and Cody asked, is that 70 trees per acre? And you responded affirmative. So we are crossing, we've got bees, and we're in our 5th year, but I wanted as a backup plan to plant trees, and so we've kind of started that orchard. Am I reading that right? We have to have 70 trees per acre?
Let me get that. Let me get to that point. Okay, right here.
Irrigated, non-irrigated orchards.
Irrigated, non-irrigated orchard. Okay. Now again, I pulled this directly off of their website. So
For 3 acres, it's a minimum of 3 acres, 70 improved productive fruit-bearing trees. So is it
with a 25-foot spacing.
correct? So is it 3 acres needs 70 trees, or is it 70 trees down here equals 1 acre of orchard? What is that?
I'm thinking that's 70 trees per acre, but I would call the Fannin County Central Appraisal District and ask them specifically, because I'm not the one that has to interpret what this means.
Sure.
Hey,
To
Okay.
me, it means 70 trees per acre for a traditional orchard. But again, I'm not the one interpreting that law and saying, this is what it is. I would call directly to them. And whenever you do, ask for the person in charge of the ag appraisals.
Hey,
That's
Kathy,
going to be,
Go ahead.
I'll try to make a phone call on that here in a little bit, because I'm kind of getting confused reading this thing too, because it's saying 70 improved productive fruit-bearing trees with a 25-foot spacing, or 27 with a 40-foot spacing. So I'm wondering if it's.
Is it 70 if you do 25 foot, or can you do 27 trees with a 40-foot spacing?
Correct. And then,
Oh.
so Cody, if you could find that out for me, I'd appreciate it.
You bet. Blake, before you run that slide off, let me write this down on what it says. So 70, and I think that's how we're gonna. That's what it's gonna be. If you're putting them at a 25-foot spacing, then it's gonna take 70 trees, and if you're going with a 40-foot spacing, 27 trees.
I just can't see the math on that, but I mean, it just seems awfully crowded. But anyway, if you'll find out, I'd appreciate it.
You're just in a 15-foot difference right there, but
Yeah.
3 times as many trees nearly.
Well, and it may depend on what size of canopy you have. I mean, I'm sure it does. What size of canopy you have on those trees as to what the spacing is. And maybe that's what they're getting down to. I don't know. And that's a great question, but it's one that I can tell you what I think it means to me, and Cody can say what he thinks it means to him. But ultimately, it is the Central Appraisal District's the one that's going to be evaluating it. So, yeah, Cody, if you can find out, that'd be great.
I'll call them right now. So, Blake, once you get everybody back together, just go ahead and start it, because I'm going to call them and mute my mic. When I get an answer, I'll jump back in.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll get that. We'll get going probably in another minute. I do know if any of the real estate agents have stuck around during the break, I do know that a lot of this you may have seen if you came over and if you've seen this presentation before, but trust me, there's some new information that we're coming to real quick that that is going to be highly important, and you do need to know about some changes that have actually occurred in the law itself. Are there any other questions that anyone may have in the next minute?
Blake, I have a question about cattle animal units. How much do calves count as?
They're going to count. Cody, do you know what I'm thinking it's like 0.1 or 0.2 animal units.
Give me just a second. I'm on the phone. I'll answer it in just a second.
Okay.
But it's less than the normal.
Yes, absolutely. In a stocker calf, which would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 300 to 500 pounds, is going to be, say, 0.4, 0.5 animal units. So if you've got a cow and a calf, and the cow weighs 1,000 pounds, and the calf that's still nursing weighs, say, 200, it may be 1.2 animal units for that cow-calf pair together.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. And I will say, you know, the Central Appraisal District's going to be looking at and throwing out animal units and things like that. Don't start questioning them about, you know, well, what does that mean for? You can ask Cody, okay, they're telling me so many animal units. What do we need to do if I'm looking at producing, you know, stocker calves? Say calves from 300, raising them up to 500, 700 pounds, and then selling them. How many is that going to equate to? Cody can help you out there. You can cross-check it with the Central Appraisal District and make sure. But Cody's your production specialist for Fannin County. He's going to be able to have all the information that you need. All right, it looks like it's straight up 11 o'clock. And so I do encourage you, if you have any questions, please stop me. Please ask, you know, questions as we go. I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end, but I know that this next subject is one that's so much fun to cover regardless of who I'm talking to. It's one that really people appreciate and love that it's in place and love the law here. We're talking about the rollback tax. If property is in agriculture and if you cease ag production, you do not engage in any ag activities, it's considered to have changed use. And that's whenever a rollback tax will be triggered. Central appraisal districts don't have any leeway here in terms of taking away, you know, that you've stopped use. They say that a rollback tax will be applied. And so this is one that really gets everyone going. Now, before we move on to that, there's a question that I've gotten quite a few times. Let's say that I buy some property up there in Fannin County and I want to move up there. So I buy 20, 30 acres and it's raw land. So I run the sewer, I run the electricity, I run all the utilities out to that land, and I build a house. Well, the Central Appraisal District is going to say, okay, it was an ag use, and you're still producing, let's say, hay on 29 acres. We're going to take 1 acre out for your homestead. As long as I move into that house and I claim it as my homestead, I will not incur a rollback on that 1 acre that was taken out for my homestead. You will not incur a rollback unless you move out within the first 5 years from that house. Then the Central Appraisal District can go back and can incur a rollback on that 1 acre of property. Now, do they do this? I don't think they have the time. I haven't found a Central Appraisal District that has gone back and applied a rollback if someone moves out within 5 years, but they do have that ability. So anybody that's looking, that has a dream of going out, buying some property, moving out of the city, you know, real estate agents on here. You may have some people from Dallas that have the dream of going out and getting away from it all. Just make sure if you're going to build that house on that property, that you're going to live there for at least 5 years, because if you don't, there could be some problems if you moved out. Now, the rollback tax, it's pretty simple in terms of calculating it. You take what you would have paid property tax wise at market value. You subtract off what you did pay in property taxes for agricultural property, and you add 5% interest per year for the last 3 years. Now, this law just changed this past September 2019. This law changed. Before September 2019, they did the same calculation on top, but they looked at the last 5 years and they charged 7% interest. Now they've cut it down to 3 years and 5% interest. It's still a wad of money in terms of rollback tax, but it's not as bad as what it was prior to September of 2019. Now, remember my example, that 30.84 acres just south of Stonebriar Mall. They paid $109.94 in property taxes. Well, they've actually pulled it out of agriculture. They're developing it now. It's right on the access road. You can see it. I had my daughter actually take this picture with her iPhone right out of the windows as we were exiting the freeway. And I said, you know, I need a picture. And she's hanging out of the window taking this picture. They've changed use, and they triggered a rollback on this property. Remember, they would have paid $612,000 in property taxes at market. They actually paid $109,000. There's a huge difference there. To calculate this rollback tax, we look at what they would have paid in property taxes 3 years ago. They would have paid at market value $613,000 in property taxes. 3 years ago, the market value is a little bit higher. They paid $163. The difference there is $612,000 and some change. You've got interest that you apply there. You take that $612,000 times 5% interest times 3 years ago, that's $91,900 in interest alone. You add the difference in the property taxes and the interest, that's over $700,000 in rollback taxes that they owe for 2017. You've got to do that now for 2018 and 2019. Here's a breakdown of the property taxes, of the rollback taxes for 17, 18, and 19. They're looking at a $2 million bill here for the last 3 years in rollback taxes. With the property valued at $26.8 million, that's about 7.62% of the value of the land is going to be rollback taxes. Now, who pays that rollback tax? If you're buying that land and you're pulling it out, or someone else is buying your land and pulling it out of agriculture, who pays that who pays that rollback tax? That's negotiable. That's negotiated whenever you're negotiating the price. Either the buyer or the seller can pay for it. I can tell you this, if I'm the buyer and I'm going to pay the rollback tax, I'm not going to pay you $26.8 million for that 30.84 acres. I'm going to take off about $2 million off that price. If I'm the seller and I'm paying it, I'm not going to take anything less than that 26.8 plus the $2 million, because that seller's going to have to pay it. They're going to probably raise the price. If the buyer's going to have to pay it, the price is probably going to be justified to come down. Just depends on who pays it. Now, another thing that I do want to talk about, and this happens a lot in agriculture, and it's very important to landowners that might be buying ag property, and it's very important to the real estate agents that we have out there in this program, because it's something that your buyers need to know about or your sellers need to know about. Again, supplemental market adjustments, very common in agriculture. Remember, whenever it comes to rollback taxes, if the use is changed in 2020, if I bought that 30.84 acres in 2019 and I changed the use, I started moving dirt in 2020, rollback taxes are calculated based on the last 3 full years. So 2019, 18, and 17. If I bought the land in 2020 and if I converted it in 2021, then the rollback would be for 2020, 2019, and 2018. Now, this land, the use was changed in 2020. So the rollback taxes, for the example that I gave, rollback taxes were calculated for the full year of 2019, 18, and 17. Question is what happens about 2020? I've already paid the property taxes at ag value for 2020. What happens to that? Well, that's where you're going to see the supplemental market adjustment come in. And it's used to adjust those property taxes for 2020. I will say that this is in litigation right now in the Dallas District Courts. We don't know how that's going to come out, but right now, central appraisal districts are using this. And this is one that could come back and really hit you after the fact, and you may not know anything about it. For an example, let's say that I sell ag land, and I sell it to Cody on July 1st, 2020. Well, rollback taxes, they're going to be calculated for 2019, 18, and 17. I've already paid my ag property taxes. I've already paid them for the year, for 2020. That's where a supplemental market adjustment's going to be sent out, because it's going to adjust 2020 for the ag value and the market value. It's going to, we need that difference. We're not going to charge any interest on it, but we are going to collect the difference for the current year if there's a rollback. The thing is the tax district doesn't update the new owner's name until January 1st of 2021. So if I've sold that land in July of 2020 to Cody, they're not going to know Cody. They're not going to have a record of Cody being the owner until January 1st of 2021. That supplemental market adjustment, you kind of see where I'm coming here. I'm going to quote kind of Garth Brooks, in his live version of Friends in Low Places. You kind of see what's coming, right? Well, you're right. If a supplemental market adjustment is required, the tax district's going to send that bill to the owner of record on January 1st of 2020, the year that was sold. That would be me. I've already sold the land. The rollback taxes, Cody agreed to pay those, but we didn't say anything about supplemental market adjustment, and that bill came to me. And it's at that point, I'm going to have to work something out with Cody, with the new owner. If I don't, that bill's sent to me, I'm going to have to pay it. And it's at that point that I'll be singing the third verse of the live version of Friends in Low Places, which if you haven't heard it, then I do recommend going to get it. If you have, I think you kind of know what that mysterious third verse says. The solution here, make sure if you're going to buy ag property, make sure if you're going to sell ag property, make sure if you're representing anybody that's buying or selling ag property, you not only include language in regards to the rollback taxes and who's going to pay them, but include language in the contract, who's going to pay the supplemental market adjustment if there's one that's required. because that can hit you out of the blue. And, you know, if it's something like commercial land, you're looking at possibly a $600,000 bill that could come in for this land that's here in Plano. That could be huge. It could be small if the difference in the market value and the ag value is lower, but still it's a bill that could hit you out of nowhere. Just make sure that it's included in the contract, not only who's going to pay the rollback, but who's going to pay if there's a supplemental market adjustment. That's one that the central appraisal districts told me, hey, we need you to make sure and get this word out. This is very, very important. This is something we need everybody to know, because oftentimes we see it a lot in agriculture where people will come in after they've already closed and they're saying, why am I getting this bill? Everything was done. All the rollback taxes were paid. Well, there's a difference. Rollback taxes are based on what happened all of last year, all the year before that, and all the year before that. It doesn't say anything about this year. And that's why the timing can be kind of fishy, because if you sell the land before the tax bills due and before the taxes are paid, then that can be handled. If not, if the tax is already paid, if it's after, say, March or April, then you could have a problem. You could have this supplemental market adjustment sent out. Some final thought, some lenders, they don't have any experience whenever it comes to agricultural land notes. They just don't. And the closer that you get in towards all the concrete that I sit on right now, the more is the case. That they want central appraisal districts, whenever they send out their appraisal for a loan, they don't like it that central appraisal districts stamp up on the top corner in red ink, may be subject to rollback. And they've even asked central appraisal districts, we need you to take this off. Well, central appraisal districts say, we can't. We don't know what the next landowner's going to do. We can't say that for sure ag use is going to continue. And I've even had some central appraisal districts say that some lenders have called and threatened them and said, we're going to have your job. Well, go ahead. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but we can't take that off. Well, the banks, then they've got a choice. There's a term, there's a file called the T30 endorsement. And the banks will have to waive that T30 endorsement in order for this property to go through and to close. If they don't, a title company cannot insure it. If the banks will not waive that T30 endorsement, the title companies can't insure the property. So banks, there's a lot of large commercial banks that don't understand agriculture, and they're refusing to waive that T30 endorsement. What they're doing is they're forcing the land to be taken out of agriculture and then roll it and pay the rollback tax. And they're saying to the property buyers, don't worry, you can just reapply. Well, that creates some huge problems. Number one, if I roll it out and if I have to pay that rollback, that money's gone. I won't get that back. Number two, I may not be guaranteed that I'm going to get it back in agriculture. And so there's a lot of issues there. Now, I will say that some central appraisal districts that I've talked to that are close to the Metroplex, and in particular, I know Denton County, they realize this is a problem. And if the potential buyer comes in and talks to them and says, look, this is what's going on. They're not waiving this endorsement and they're forcing me to roll it out, but I'm going to apply the day that I close on the property. I'm going to send in my application to reapply, or it's going to be the day after. The Denton County Central Appraisal District will take it off momentarily just so that they can print out the form. They'll roll it out of agriculture just so they can print out the form. without that stamp, so it can go through, knowing that immediately they're going to come back and they're going to apply again and roll it back in. So this is where talking to the Central Appraisal District, whether you're the buyer or whether you're representing the buyer, being able to talk to the Central Appraisal District and tell them, this is what's going on. This is what we need to happen. That's where they can help, and where it's very important to talk to them and shoot straight. Another potential solution here is get a lender who understands agricultural land notes. Get one that understands that the Central Appraisal District cannot take this off. You may pay a little bit higher rate, I will say with that, but usually they don't require the land be taken out of agriculture and the rollback being paid. They also have loan packages for home loans that you could use to do financing for the home loan and financing for agriculture. Another recommendation that I have here is, if you do own property that has agricultural use and your homestead on it, check and see if you have separate tax ID numbers for your homestead and the agricultural property. If they're all underneath one identification number with the Central Appraisal District, you can request that they come out and resurvey and put your homestead underneath one ID number and your ag land underneath another. That can help whenever it comes to possibly refinancing, if you wanted to refinance your house, because you'll be able to not include that ag land in the refinancing. It helps whenever you're going to possibly go to sell it, or, you know, if you're buying it, if it can be in separate tax ID numbers, that will help a lot, because you could come up with financing and have one note for the house, have one note for the land, different terms on each, and you may want to pay off the ag property quicker than you do the homestead. Those are just a few ins and outs here. Another thing I'm going to say in terms of rollback taxes, if you're selling or if you're buying property and it's going to have a rollback tax, contact the Central Appraisal, or contact the tax district, not the Central Appraisal District, the tax district, and request a rollback tax estimate for the day of closing. They can generate that tax, that rollback tax estimate, send it to closing, and it can be handled right there at the closing table. If you're going to do this, give them a few days. Don't just say, oh yeah, we're selling that property today at 3 o'clock and we need to call the tax district and get that rollback tax. No, that's not going to work. And also, the only person that can request that rollback tax estimate is the property owner themselves. The buyer cannot, the buyer's agent cannot, the real estate agent representing the seller cannot. The only person that can contact the tax district and request that rollback tax is the owner, current owner of that property. Now, I've talked a lot about these CADs. The thing that I want to say is that most of them are pragmatic. I will say that there's a few out there that can be pretty difficult to deal with, but most are pragmatic. Most of them want to work with you and help you. And so be honest with them, shoot straight with them. Like I've said before, they've just about heard every single scam that's out there. They've seen it or they've heard about it. Don't try and give them a snow job. Shoot straight with them, because oftentimes just shooting straight with them, you're going to come out and they're going to help you quite a bit. We have covered a lot. You should have some basic understanding that more is required than just putting a couple of cows out there to qualify for ag valuation. There are agencies set up to help you. And I want to highlight some of those right now. One of them is Extension. Cody Maxwell, the person who got this meeting together and is sponsoring this thing, He's part of Texas AgriLife Extension. We've got 254 counties in the state of Texas, and there's a county agent that services all those 254 counties. Some of them may be in transition, maybe a county agent retired, or maybe one of them switched to a different position, so it's vacant right now. But we do have someone that is covering that county that might be a neighboring county agent. We do have coverage for you. And these county agents, they are our backbone, and they are our grassroots on the ground, hands-on. They know their individual county better than anybody else. And so whenever I ask a question about Fannin County, I'm going to call Cody because he is my point of reference. There's no one that knows it like him. Natural Resource Conservation Service, part of USDA, or NRCS as we call them. They've got a lot of information, but some of the things that NRCS can do is they've got some cost share programs. For instance, if you want to put a pond in on your property, they can come out and they can help you in terms of designing that pond, and they may even have some cost share programs if you qualify to help pay for part of that pond development. Farm Service Agency, part of USDA, that's the lending side of, and the government program side of USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. They've got a vast amount of information about what's grown in the area, about what's required, as well as, like I said, some of those government programs that can help both large and small acreage producers. Central Appraisal District, I put them on here. They're an information source. They're there to help you, believe it or not. They are not the taxing entity. What their job is to put a value on the property. And so the Central Appraisal District, they are a great source of information. I mean, a great source. And they can help you if you go in and just shoot straight with them. Now, in terms of real estate, since we're talking about property taxes, another group that maybe some don't know much about is the Real Estate Center down at Texas A&M University. Now, this Real Estate Center is the largest publicly funded organization devoted specifically to real estate research. And actually, some of the fees that are paid by real estate agents whenever they pay for their license, it goes towards funding this center. They have a vast amount of information about trends in the economy, about trends in real estate that are going on, both at the entire state level as well as regional level. And you can even get some county data in there, some specific information about some of your individual markets. So great source of information there as well. I do encourage you, you can go online and look up the Real Estate Center. It's a great source of information. Now, one thing I want to throw in there, I mentioned Farm Service Agency, and I sat down and I asked at one time, I said, hey, you know, I'm doing all these small acreage programs. I'm doing programs for real estate agents. What would be something that you would want me to share if I had 2 minutes? What is an elevator hot topic that you want me to share? And they said, giving homage to George Strait here, write this down. They said, we want you to cover Farm Service Agency FSA 153, that form. It's the Agricultural Foreign Investment Disclosure Act. That's the report from that act. This act, the Agricultural Foreign Investment Act, was passed in 1978. And this requires that any non-U.S. citizen who purchases ag property and owns at least 10% ownership of that ag property, they have to fill out this form, FSA 153, if within 90 days of purchase. If they do not, and do not submit it to Farm Service Agency within 90 days, they're subject to a fine of up to 25% of the fair market value of that property. So again, you have to own 25%, or you have to own 10% ownership of ag property, and you have to have purchased it within 90 days, and this form has to be filled out. Right now, I can say that USDA I ask. They don't have the manpower really to enforce this, but I know that there's county FSA offices that are required to turn in names if they find that they're in violation, and they're turning in about the estimate out of Collin County is only about 10% have filled this form out. There's over $40 billion worth of ag property owned in the United States by non-U.S. citizens. If only 10% filled that out, that's a chunk of change that's just waiting out there to be gathered. So if you're not a U.S. citizen and you do purchase ag property, if you're representing somebody that is a non-U.S. citizen and they're purchasing ag property, make sure that they fill this form out, or at least provide it to them. Or if you're buying it, make sure that you fill it out. It's easy to find. You just type into Google FSA 153 form, and it's the first one that pops up. It's a PDF file that you can fill out online. Coming towards the conclusion of all this property tax stuff, looking at the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle represents the area from, traditionally it was Dallas-Fort Worth down to San Antonio, across to Houston and back up. I think that northern boundary is probably pushed up, and Cody, you're probably seeing a lot of development moving out your way. You got higher average incomes in this area, and with those higher average incomes, people want to move off the concrete. They want to get a little bit of space between them and their neighbor. They want to try and get a little bit of property of their own. A lot don't have much experience in terms of agriculture. And no, this picture is not altered at all. This picture here is actually someone that put a cow in the back seat of Mama's SUV. Now, I hope Mama did it, because I know that if I did that, whenever I got home, there would be some serious trouble. But if you're unsure, there are agencies set up to guide you after the purchase. We've gone over some of them, and probably the go-to is the Extension Service. The thing is that a lot of people need guidance before they buy land, because we need to plan before we buy land. Here's the Duggards. I'm sure that you've at least heard of them, 1,900 kids and counting. If the Duggards wanted to buy a house, you'd ask some questions. How many bedrooms? And once you picked your jaw up off the floor, whenever they said, oh, I don't know, probably 28, then, you would know that, okay, a small 3-bedroom, 2-bath's not going to work. You probably need a hotel. But the key is that you would ask questions before they started just buying a house. Same goes for agriculture. I'd like to see questions. I want to buy some land outside the city, build a house on it. Okay, you're looking at farmer ranch. Do you know what you want to do? I just figured out once I got the land. That's what we in the extension normally hear. I'd like to see it back up. Let's think about the planning process beforehand. Let's look at what type of land we actually need, and then let's go and search for that land. So why don't we call the extension agent before we buy the land, come up with a plan, and then go buy that land that fits that plan. Then we won't be looking for land like on the left, whenever what we're really needing is a hay field, or we're needing pasture with fences around it. It's going to cost a lot if you get the wrong type of land. And Cody, I'm sure you can attest to it. There's a lot of people that call in after they bought property, and they want to know, what can I do with it? And you do a site evaluation and you say, well, if we're going to put cattle on here, we need new fences. That's going to cost probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, $75,000 for new fences. If you're going to be planting crops, you're going to try and produce hay. We're going to have to clear these trees and grub them up. That's $250 per hour for a dozer. And suddenly they're seeing, well, there's dollar signs after the fact. And a lot of times the comments we get are, well, if I'd have known all this before I bought the land, I'd have bought something different. Come up with a plan before you buy the land and then go search for what you want. That's where I'd ultimately love to see it go. To date, I've had a lot of calls from real estate agents and landowners. I've been asked to interpret the Central Appraisal District statements. What does it mean on this line? And I'm happy to do that. Those are pretty straightforward. I've had questions of, what do I need to ask the Central Appraisal District? I've had landowners that have asked, I'm going in to talk to them. I've had real estate agents ask, I've got a problem. What do I need? How do I solve this? And all of these are centered around problems that are occurring. For example, there was a guy that was buying some land, and he was from California, and the land that he was buying was 12 acres just north of Plano. He was closing September of 2019, and he was going to build a house on the property. Probably going to take 9 months to build. The property that he was buying, that 12 acres, it currently had agricultural use. It was already designated that way. And the question was, how do I keep it while I'm not there? I'm not moving until the house is finished. How do I keep this ag use? Whenever the buyer called me, he already knew I want to do bees, and he had already contacted the Texas Beekeepers Association. He already got some names in the local area, and already had somebody that was willing to come out and put beehives on the property and manage those beehives for him. So that was set in stone, no problem. We're going to have bees out there until I move to town. And then we're going to decide if we want to continue on with that lease arrangement. He wanted to know, though, what to do, because he wasn't comfortable with having somebody come out there and put bees on the property while he wasn't there. He didn't want that lease arrangement to start until he moved. He wanted to know, what do I do while the house is being built before I get there? And I asked him some questions about the property. Who'd you buy it from? He said, well, my neighbor lives next door. Okay, did that neighbor sell all the property? No, he still lives there. Well, what was the neighbor doing? He was running cattle. He had cattle on the property. Does he still have cattle? Yes. Is there a gate between you and him? Yes. Open the gate. Let him continue to run cattle on the property that he's been doing for the last 40 years. And then you're leasing it out to him. And so let him continue to do it for the next 9 months until you move. And you can maintain your ag use. Another example, there was a guy that was buying land, was in the middle of negotiating the land deal, how much he was going to pay for the land. And they received a notice from the CAD that it might be subject to rollback. Remember that stamp that's up there? Well, they took it that it would be subject to rollback. And so they lawyered up. They're ready to go to mediation the very next day. And they decided to give me a call. What do we do? I asked them some questions. What are you going to do with the property? Well, we're going to build a house on it. Okay, well, we know if we build a house and we move into it and it's our homestead, there's no rollback there. And I asked, what are you going to do with the other property, the other part of the property? Well, we're going to continue to farm it. We're going to continue to go. I said, okay, there's not going to be a rollback there. So there's not going to be a rollback. Look at your stamp. It says it may be subject to rollback. They felt kind of dumb, but the lawyers were really happy because they got to keep their retainers. So, start asking some questions. Make sure beforehand. I can tell you the last example that I have was an older couple that was here in Collin County. And they had retired. He was in his mid 80s. She was in her low 80s. And they had retired. They had retired 10 years ago. And whenever they retired from their day job, they thought, okay, we can retire from farming too. They owned about 20 acres up near Melissa. And they got the letter because the Central Appraisal District finally caught them. They got the letter that you're going to be subject to rollback tax because we're pulling your ag use. Well, their only solution is we have to sell. We don't have an option here. We have to sell this property. So they got a real estate agent, and the real estate agent called me because they had a problem. They were representing people on either side of them, of the older couple, with about 20 acres on either side. So it's a 60-acre deal, and they were selling it to a large producer here in Collin County. And they were on their way to the Central Appraisal District and said, what do I need to do? And I said, well, first thing, don't tell me who the producer is because it's one of two people in Collin County, and I don't need to know that. But the Central Appraisal District, you do want to say who the deal is, who's on the other side of the deal. And I said, then just go in and shoot straight with them and say, here's the thing. Because it was after the protest period. So how do I handle this? What do I do? Lay out the scenario. I got a phone call back in 15 minutes and they said the Central Appraisal District listened. They typed on the computer a little bit. They took that letter that said that there was going to be a rollback tax. They tore it up and said, you have your ag use back. Go get this deal done. This just shows how Central Appraisal Districts can be pragmatic. They're there to help real estate agents if you just shoot straight with them. They're there to help landowners if you'll just shoot straight with them. Don't try and snow them, shoot straight with them, and chances are they're going to help you out. In conclusion, Central Appraisal Districts, they expect people to know what they're doing. You bought that land for a purchase, for a purpose. You know, I'm not going to go out and just buy a commercial building and then say, oh, I'll decide what I'm going to do with it once I have it. No, you're not going to do that. You're not going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go out and buy a strip shopping mall and then decide what you're going to do. Same thing with ag property. Central Appraisal District expects you bought this land, this agricultural land, for a purpose. And so they expect you to hit the ground running and to know. So a general knowledge of questions to ask and sources for information can make for a happier buyer or landowner, knowing we need to talk to Cody. Let's figure out what we want to do before we buy this land, or if you've already bought it, talk to Cody. You know, how am I doing? What am I doing? He's there to help. Takeaways from this: ag appraisals. There are 6 criteria that are listed for Central Appraisal Districts to follow. And these criteria are sitting down from the state of Texas. The ag appraisal, it applies to the land only. You have to be actively engaged in agriculture. The principal use must be agriculture. The degree of intensity has to be similar to what's in the rest of the county. Devoted to agriculture in 5 out of the last 7 years if you're outside the city limits. And you have to file a valid application on time. For livestock, it's going to take a little bit more than just putting a few cattle out there. Do I expect you or anyone to say, you know, to be able to say, well, I've got this many acres of native pasture, so here's how many animal units I need? No. Call Cody. Say, Cody, here's what I've got. What am I looking at? This is what Central Appraisal District's telling me I need. I need 5 animal units. So how many 750-pound calves does that mean I need out here? He can help you with determining animal units and how many to put out. Not all animals are created equal. A cow's not the same as a goat whenever it comes to animal units. We have to keep that in mind. For crops, typical production practices are going to be expected. Typical yields are going to be expected. That for sure. Then we need to look at acreage requirements. Is there going to be an acreage requirement? Rollback taxes, they're only triggered whenever you have a change in use, whenever you pull it out of agriculture. You're not going to trigger a rollback if you switch from corn to wheat, or if you switch from hay to now I'm producing cattle. It's going to be whenever you have a change in use, whenever you cease meeting the requirements of the 6 that are laid out for ag use. These rollback taxes, they can be extremely expensive. They can and do need to be negotiated. If you're buying or selling property, they need to be negotiated if there's going to be a rollback as to who's going to pay for it and that supplemental market adjustment. Negotiate that too. There's agencies that are there to support you. They're designed to provide assistance. Ideally, contact them before the land is purchased. But if the land has been purchased already, use that agency. That's what we're there for. Also, it's not an exemption. You still have to pay property taxes if you own ag land. You still have to pay them at the same rate. The difference is it's the value that's been put on that land is different because it has been designated with ag use. I'd be happy to entertain any and all questions now. I appreciate you listening to me for the last couple of hours. Here's my contact information. You can contact me directly at my office. My office phone's listed on there. If you call and happen to get my message or answer machine, you can leave a message. I immediately get an email that says, hey, you've got a message, you need to return it. So I can access those messages anywhere. Also, my email address is down there, b-bennett@tamu.edu. That is a dash and not an underscore. Feel free to reach out if you've got any questions. Trust me, I've seen a lot of them. I mean, a whole lot of questions from not just here in